Maria Shriver stood at a podium in a blue suit and told America that 16 women were lying. She knew some part of her already knew they weren't. And she did it anyway. That is the fact this entire story rests on. Not the affair. Not the housekeeper. Not the son born 5 days after her own son, under the same roof, to the woman cleaning her bathrooms. The fact that defines 25 years of Maria Shriver's life is a single afternoon in October of 2003, when she looked into a camera and chose her marriage over 16 women who were telling the truth. Everything else, the baby shower, the 14 years of silence, the $400 million divorce, flows downstream from that afternoon. That is where the real story begins. To understand why she did it, you have to understand what kind of woman Maria Shriver was built to be. She was not born into an ordinary family. She was born into the Kennedys. Her mother was Eunice Kennedy Shriver, sister of President John F. Kennedy. Her uncles were Robert and Ted. Her father, Sergeant Shriver, ran the Peace Corps and ran for Vice President of the United States. The Kennedy name meant power and pedigree and a specific kind of discipline that never made it onto the Christmas cards. Because the Kennedy men were also notorious. John Kennedy had Marilyn Monroe and a dozen women nobody named publicly. Robert Kennedy had his own affairs. Ted Kennedy drove off a bridge at Chappaquiddick in July of 1969 and left a 28-year-old woman named Mary Jo Kopechne to drown, then spent 9 hours deciding whether to report it. And the Kennedy women, Maria's mother, her aunts, her female cousins, were trained from childhood to do one thing and do it beautifully. Stand beside their husbands. Smile for the cameras. Never ask what happened when the men were away. In that family, looking away was not weakness. Looking away was the price of the name. Maria grew up watching her mother perfect that art. She watched the most powerful women in America make themselves smaller so the men beside them could appear larger. She absorbed it the way children absorb everything, not as a lesson, but as the shape of the world. So when she met Arnold Schwarzenegger in 1977 at a charity tennis tournament, she was a 21-year-old Kennedy princess and he was a 30-year-old Austrian bodybuilder with an accent like gravel and the kind of ambition that fills every room it enters. Her mother told her this man would embarrass the family. And Maria did something Kennedy women almost never did. She chose him anyway. She thought she was breaking the pattern. She thought choosing Arnold, loud, foreign, self-made, nothing like the polished Kennedy men, meant she was different from her aunts. But here is what Maria has only started saying out loud at 70 years old. She didn't break the pattern. She married a different version of the same man her aunts had married. The accent was different. The dynamic was identical. And she did not walk into that marriage blind. They dated for 9 years before Arnold proposed. 9 years. And during those 9 years, Maria knew things. Friends in Hollywood told her. The tabloids printed the rumors. In 1985, Arnold filmed Red Sonja alongside Brigitte Nielsen, and according to multiple sources, they were sleeping together while Maria was planning their wedding at the Kennedy compound in Hyannisport. Maria confronted him. He denied it. Then he admitted it. Then he promised it was over. She believed him, or she told herself she believed him, which is not the same thing and she knew it even then. She walked down the aisle in April of 1986 in a Christian Dior gown with an 11-foot train. Oprah Winfrey read a poem at the ceremony. Andy Warhol was there. Caroline Kennedy stood beside her as maid of honor. And on that day, somewhere behind the veil and the flowers and the famous faces, Maria made a private agreement with herself. She would stay. She would manage him. She would smooth the rumors and deflect the accusations and trust that the marriage she was building in private was stronger than what the world kept whispering about in public. For 15 years, she was genuinely good at it. She had 4 children. She built her own broadcast career. She won a Peabody Award. She was not simply Arnold's wife. She was Maria Shriver, journalist, on her own terms. She was managing him and managing herself and managing the image of their family with the precision of someone who had watched it done at the highest level her entire life. But denial has a shelf life. In early 1997, 2 women in Arnold Schwarzenegger's life were pregnant at the same time. The first was Maria, 41 years old, mother of 3, carrying her 4th and final child. The second was Mildred Beener, the housekeeper. The woman who had worked in the Brentwood mansion for years. The woman who had cleaned Maria's floors and attended her family's birthday parties and watched Maria's children grow up in that house. Both women were carrying Arnold's sons. Both pregnancies unfolding in the same hallways, through the same months, under the same roof. Christopher Schwarzenegger was born on September 27, 1997. Joseph Biener was born on October 2, 1997. 5 days apart. And Maria threw Mildred a baby shower. She bought gifts. She smiled across a table at the woman carrying her husband's child and celebrated that pregnancy with the warmth and generosity she brought to everything in her life. She did not know. That is the part that requires you to sit with it. She did not know. For 14 years after those 2 boys were born, she did not know. Joseph ate breakfast in Maria's kitchen. He swam in her pool. He attended the same birthday parties as Christopher, his half-brother, 5 days older, and neither boy had any idea. Mildred came to work every morning, looked Maria directly in the face, accepted the Christmas bonuses, smiled in the family photos, and said nothing. 2 people in that house knew the truth. And neither of them was Maria. But here is the question that haunts everything that follows. The one that anyone who has ever been through their own version of this cannot stop asking. How did Maria not see it? Because Joseph Biener looked exactly like Arnold Schwarzenegger. The jawline. The build. The eyes. He looked more like Arnold than some of Maria's own 4 children did. She had looked at that boy dozens of times, hundreds of times over the years. Something in her had to have noticed. And the answer is more painful than the lie. Maria did notice. According to what she has shared in interviews and writing in the years since, she began to suspect around 2008, when Joseph was 11 years old. Other people had noticed too. Friends were whispering. Tabloid reporters had started asking questions. The resemblance was becoming impossible to explain away. But Maria had spent 22 years training herself not to see things. She knew precisely what she was doing. Because once you know, you cannot unknow. And once you cannot unknow, every birthday party and Christmas dinner and Sunday morning in that house becomes something else entirely. The entire architecture of the life you built collapses into a different shape. So she pushed it down. She reminded herself that Mildred was a trusted member of the household. She did what every woman in her family before her had been trained to do. She looked away. And she did it for 3 more years. By early 2011, Joseph was 13, and the resemblance was no longer deniable in any practical sense. Staff in the household had started talking. But something else had also changed. In August of 2009, Maria's mother Eunice died. In January of 2011, her father Sergeant died. The 2 people whose approval had structured her entire adult life were gone. The audience she had been performing the perfect marriage for, the parents who had taught her to look away, who had modeled and required that looking away, no longer existed. For the first time in 25 years, Maria Shriver did not have anyone to protect the performance for. One afternoon, she pulled Mildred aside and asked the question directly. Is Joseph Arnold's son? Mildred didn't lie this time. She told the truth that had been living inside that house for 14 years. What Maria has said about the moment that followed is that she walked upstairs, sat on the edge of her bed, and cried so hard she could not breathe. And what she was crying about, she has been careful to say, was not the affair. The affair, in some buried part of her she had already accepted years before. Brigitte Nielsen. The rumors from set after set. The 16 women in 2003. Maria had been managing Arnold's infidelity since before they were married. She knew the shape of it, even when she refused to look directly at it. What broke her was the 14 years. The baby shower she threw. The Christmas dinners where both boys were present. The moment she had looked at Joseph and felt something strange move through her that she could not name and trained herself to dismiss. The press conference. The blue suit. The camera. The 16 women she had stood in front of and called wrong while the housekeeper down the hall was raising her husband's son. That was what she was crying about. The lie had never been only Arnold's. The lie was also hers. And she had been the one maintaining it the longest, with the most discipline, at the highest cost to herself. Maria filed for divorce 3 days after Mildred confessed. The divorce took 10 years to finalize. 10 years. One of the longest and most financially complex celebrity divorces in American legal history. Arnold paid her over $400 million, half of everything accumulated during the marriage, because there was no prenuptial agreement. Under California community property law, every Terminator paycheck, every real estate deal, every studio percentage point Arnold had touched during their 25 years together belonged equally to Maria. She was entitled to it. And she took it. But she did not take the revenge tour she was legally and publicly positioned to take. She did not write the tell-all. She did not give the Oprah interview designed to destroy him. She did not raise 4 children in the wreckage of their father's reputation. Instead, she turned the camera around. At 70 years old, Maria Shriver has started doing something almost no public woman in her position ever does. She stopped narrating what Arnold did and started telling the truth about herself. In her 2 best-selling books, I've Been Thinking, published in 2018, and Radical Acceptance, published in 2022, and in interviews she has given since, she has said the thing she cannot forgive herself for is not the marriage. It is the press conference. It is October of 2003. It is the blue suit and the camera and the 16 women who were telling the truth. She helped him win the gubernatorial election that day. She helped him serve 2 terms as governor of California. And 16 women, many of them, were never fully believed because of what she said, because of the credibility she lent him with her own. That is the weight she carries. Not the affair. Not Mildred. Those were choices Arnold made and choices Mildred made. The press conference was Maria's choice. She has never publicly apologized to those 16 women. But people close to her say it is the regret that sits the heaviest, heavier than everything else, because it is the one moment in the entire story that belongs entirely to her. She founded the women's Alzheimer's movement after her father's death. She returned to NBC as a special anchor. She started the Sunday paper, a weekly newsletter about gratitude and rebuilding. She dropped Schwarzenegger from her professional name. She is Maria Shriver now. That is the only name she uses. In 2023, Arnold finally said on camera what Maria had been waiting over a decade to hear. He said it was the biggest failure of his life. He said he was sorry. He said he had caused enough pain for his family and that he would have to live with it for the rest of his life. That word, failure, was not accidental. It was chosen by someone who had had 12 years to decide what he wanted to say. And even then, it arrived 12 years late. But Maria's story was never waiting for his apology. That is the thing this entire story has been building toward, the reversal that only becomes visible from the end. Maria Shriver appeared, for most of 25 years, to be the person with less power. She was the wife. She was the one defending. She was the one managing and performing and looking away. Arnold was the star, the governor, the one whose name was on the films and the buildings. She seemed to be the one who had sacrificed the most and received the least protection in return. But Maria walked away with $400 million, her name, her dignity, and her children's relationship with their father intact. She walked away with books on the bestseller lists and a non-profit doing genuine work and an identity that does not require Arnold Schwarzenegger's name to mean something. Arnold walked away with his legacy attached permanently to the story of what he did in that house for 14 years. The person who seemed weaker was the one who had been quietly, methodically building a life that could survive the truth. The person who looked powerful was the one who had been depending on her silence to protect him all along. And the silence, when it finally ended, was the one thing he could not survive on his own terms. So here is what I want you to think about. Should Maria have left in October of 2003, the moment those 16 women came forward, before she knew about Mildred, before she knew about Joseph? Or did she leave at exactly the right time, on her own terms, when she was finally ready? And the second question, when Maria stood at that podium in the blue suit, was she protecting Arnold, or was she protecting the only version of her life she knew how to live? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to like and subscribe to our channel. For more interesting stories like this, be sure to click on the next video that pops up on your screen. You never know what you'll discover next.